Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Let's Chat episode 8. Today, I have the privilege of hosting Rapelang Motsumi. Rapelang Motsumi. Rapelang has been working with us for many years as well, and is a family member of the YIDI team. But today, we're going to really be speaking to him about compliance for small business. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to Rapelang. Rapelang, you and I have known each other since the Branson Center days. It's been a long, long time. So
Many years back.
I consider you a friend and a member of the YIDI family. So for those individuals that are joining us or who will be viewing this later on our YouTube channel or on Facebook Live, please can you tell everyone a little bit more about who you are and some of your background and why you got into the space of entrepreneurship?
Well, thank you so much, Jayshree, for the opportunity to just talk to entrepreneurs. It's really one of my favorite time ever, when you work with entrepreneurs or share your experience with entrepreneurs. So yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time. I think I knew it very early that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I was raised in a little bit of a family business. My parents were running a spaza shop. So, and I observed how a mere spaza shop was able to carry us through as a family, as small as it was, and very simple concept. So I thought to myself, if this thing is able to provide for us as a family, it seems like it's sustainable and business is the way to go. So, and that became something that gave me an exposure of how business work, how business run. And I made a decision early that I would want to be an entrepreneur one day. And even when I go to study, I must study something that is going to equip my skill and hone my entrepreneurial skill and flair. So yeah, it has been an exciting journey for me. And when I grew up, obviously, I used to sell all the time. I sold everything that you can ever think of: the Zimba chips, the sweets, the marble glasses when we were still young, the floppy disk when I was at school. I know that so many guys may not even know what a floppy disk. I hope that doesn't reveal much about my age as well when I speak about floppy disk. So, but that was the life back then, and that is where I am right now as an entrepreneur, and that's how my journey has been like.
Well, thank you so much for that, Rapelang. And for those of you that have joined us or who will be viewing this a bit later, Rapelang, I know you want to first share some key concepts and pointers around compliance before we actually go into our discussion. So I'm going to hand over to you to touch on some of these key areas that you wanted to share with those that are attending today's session.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm just going to take the entrepreneurs through a couple of pointers around why compliance is important, because I know that most of us, we comply when we are supposed to because of where we find ourselves in, but we have not made it a culture. We have not made it as part of business process. And today I would like to bring to your attention how important it is to embrace it as part of the business process, so that it's part of your day-to-day business. So I just have a few pointers here. I think about 7 or 8. I'll run through them quickly just so that I can give Jayshree some time to go through the questions. So the first thing is about formalizing or formalization. So with formalization, is really to ensure that you formalize your business, because I always say that when you formalize, you professionalize, so that you also create a separate legal persona, to create a separate identity from you as a director or as a business owner to that of a separate legal persona to you, so that people don't have to deal with you directly, they deal with a separate entity, which is your company. So it kind of like professionalizes you. And the second thing is for governance. So just for there to be a governance structure or system. So with governance, it's really about the management and control of your company, of your business. So this also assists you in setting your business for growth, because you have this mindset of running your business like a big company. because most of the small business, they think that compliance is only necessary for big companies. But when you start putting in governance structures and systems, how your business is managed and controlled, that sets you up for growth. So that's the benefit. And the third thing, for funding. So funding is very critical, because now there are different institutions for funding, and they have different criteria in terms of what they need in terms of compliance, and it differs from one institution to another, and it will also differ with the mandate of those different institutions, as well as the type of funding that you are looking for. So for instance, if you're looking for grant funding, there will be a set of requirements for that. If it's a debt funding, if it's an equity funding, so all of that will differ in terms of the compliance requirement. Also, in terms of how big or the amount that you are looking for will always determine the level of compliance that will be required. The more money you are looking for, the more compliance will be heavy. The lesser money you are looking for, the lesser the compliance requirement will be demanded on you. And the fourth thing is procurement. And procurement is in two ways: procurement in government, procurement in the private sector. So with procurement in government or public procurement, the first thing that is important is to be listed on the CSD, which is the Central Supplier Database. So the Central Supplier Database allows you to list your profile for all the government institutions to be able to have access to that profile, so that across national government, across provincial government, across municipal levels, across the state-owned enterprise and all of that, so that there's a central repository of all the profiles of all the business that want to do the business with the state. So you list on that platform, and I've seen that most of the processes within the public procurement, at least they are predictable, they are standardized. And I'm saying this because I'm coming now into the private sector procurement. The tricky thing about the private sector procurement is that compliance is always different from one company to another. So there seem to be no standard way of determining this is what will be required. With government, you know that there's a CSD, this is the process, and then there will be other additional requirements on top of that, but it's a predictable process. But with the private sector, it's really by experience. For you and I, Jayshree, that have bidded for opportunities and look for opportunities within the private sector, we know that you go to this company, they want something different from the next company that you'll approach. So it's always very challenging to know exactly what to prepare for, what to put in place to set yourself for access to markets, especially with regards to the private sector procurement. So it's very important to underline that is very diverse, but in most of the cases, you will then have to list as a supplier into the supplier database of each of those companies, and they will give you their separate requirements that are specific to that particular company. That's why you can submit different set of documents for company A, you go to company B, you submit different set of documents altogether. So, and some of them, they want very little documents. Some of them, they want a whole host of documents that sometimes it can be very costly and expensive, especially for small businesses. And it can be some of the things that you don't have, or that you will not even going to meet as a small business. So sometimes it's quite a little bit unfriendly for us as small businesses. And then also the other thing is just to ensure that there's a CIPC compliance. So the CIPC compliance that ensure that your company is registered, and there are multiple also of other CIPC requirements with regards to the Companies Act that are going to be required. So make sure that in terms of your annual returns, they're always submitted on time, and you meet all the regulation with regards to the Companies Act that is regulated by the CIPC. So, and then the next thing is the SARS. So with the SARS, there are different tax types that you need to look into to know what is it that as a small business you have to be registered for at the level where you are, because that kind of compliance will also differ according to where you are, your turnover, your industry, and all of that. So So that will determine the type of tax types that you have to be registered for. And in terms of the income tax, it is a must that every company will be registered for income tax. That one is not even predicated on any of those conditions. And then there will be different tax types like your VAT. So VAT is turnover based. So you have to be turning over at least 50,000 to qualify for voluntary VAT registration, or if you want to do, if you are mandated to register for VAT, then you have to at least have a turnover of 1 million rand to be able to qualify for that mandatory VAT registration. And then there will be other things such as your UIFs and all of that, which is now banded about because of the COVID-19. And we have seen that throughout the COVID-19, there has been a lot of challenges with employers trying to help their employees be able to claim the UIF. So because some of the employers have not been registering their employees for the UIF, now the employees, when they need a relief, so there isn't any relief to give to the employees because they have not been registered, and that was not paid. In some cases, the UIF found that there was deductions that were made for the employees, but the employers were not filing those returns and paying those monies over to the UIF. So those are some of the things that we should be careful about as entrepreneurs, because now so many businesses have been caught with their pants down because employees have been thinking that everything is up to date with their UIF. Now there's a massive demand for the UIF, and then the company can't be able to honor those UIF for the employees. And sometimes employees are told, no, we are still waiting on SARS, we are still waiting on SARS, but they know that, you know, they didn't do the right thing. So we have to be able to do that. So the last two things is with the BE. So with the BE, obviously, as we know that as small business, in most of the cases, if you are a black small business under 10 million rand, you are likely to be a level 1, which is very competitive in terms of procurement. And you know, I was having a chat with one of the ladies in one of the big companies, and he was telling me that because they were undergoing a BE audit, they had to spend a certain amount of money. It was during the COVID period. And then that's why I was telling another entrepreneur to say that don't think when you have closed your door, corporate South Africa have closed theirs too, because they still have to spend whatever they anticipated to spend, so that when the audit come and then they file for the BE report, they have already consumed the expenditure that they set for themselves so that they can maintain the BE level that they have. So the lady was saying that, you know, I'm so desperate because this week we have to spend over 50 million. It has to leave the organization. So they were looking for service providers, but it was for different services. So she was so desperate because they had to spend that money within that particular week, and the auditors were coming. So it goes to show that even within COVID, there are companies that this time coincide with their reporting time, where they have to also ensure that they spend the budget that they have been given. And you find that given those budgets, they are no longer procuring the normal services that they used to procure. Now, what do they do with those budgets? They don't know what to do with that money, so they have to spend it. So that's why it's very important to even still sell now, because corporate South Africa, it is open for business. And the last thing is the industry compliance. Also, just know and understand that within your industry, there are different regulatory rules and norms and standards that have been set for most of the specific industries. So you have to know which industry you operate in and what are the rules that organizes that industry, and who are the industry regulatory bodies, who are the authorities in that industry that regulate the practice in those industries that you should be registered with. So we run a property accelerator program. So those are property entrepreneurs and construction entrepreneurs. So normally they would be registered with your CITB, with NHBRC. So those are the regulatory bodies that ensure practice in those specific industries. because before you operate, you have to ensure that you have either been licensed, or you have been accredited, or you have been given the necessary authority by those industry authorities to be able to have the ability to operate in those industries. So there are many layers to compliance, and I think the only way you can be able to beat it is to ensure that you make it part of the business process. You don't comply when the tender comes, you don't comply when a contract comes, and then you run around because there's no tax clearance, and then you only find that there's outstanding tax returns that needs money for you because now they are outstanding, money is being owed to SARS, and then you don't have that money. So if you can maintain it as part of the business process, it helps you to be able to always access opportunities. And the last thing that is important, Jayshree, on this is that the compliance is not just part of the business process. It's intrinsically linked to your ability to sell, because you cannot sell when you don't have all the compliance requirement. You can't sell to the government, you can't sell to corporate. It's part of a business process because it's intrinsically linked to your ability to sell. And no compliance means that you can't sell. You can't sell to unless your products and services are just to consumer products where no much compliance is needed. But ordinarily, if you want corporate South Africa, if you want government and certain small business as well, you have to ensure that your compliance is in order, because you cannot sell without compliance.
Thank you so much, Rapelang. You know, you always have just such a wealth of knowledge, and every time I listen to you, I learn something new as well. So, Rapelang, you know, you mentioned quite a few areas of compliance. I know, you know, UIF, this was highlighted now with the pandemic that we're facing. Tax clearances, there's always tax clearance requirements from many of our corporate clients. What are the main compliance areas that every entrepreneur should be kept up to date with at any point in time? So if you had to choose the top three, what would it be, Rapalang? The
Well, the
top three
first thing,
compliance areas.
obviously, the first thing is just to make sure that your company is registered. And registration will go with all what you have to meet in terms of also the annual returns and all of that have to be checked with the CIPC. So that's the first thing. And the second thing now is the tax compliance. Tax compliance is also quite broad. So, but once you are now registered with CIPC, there's already communication with SARS for you to be issued with an income tax number, so that you are on the system already upon registration. So SARS compliance is quite important, because you have to comply in terms of income tax and other tax types as well, depending on the size of your business, if it's PAYE, if it's VAT, if it's skills development levy. So most of the tax that will just depend on the size of your business and what you do and all of that. And the third thing really is but this one will just depend on from one business to another, industry compliance. So I mean that's the first thing when you get into an industry, to see if that industry has specific compliance requirement or registrations or affiliation that you have to be part of in order to observe the industry practices in that and be able to operate. So I think those will be
Yes.
the top three that I think they're quite key.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that entrepreneurs should look at definitely the central supplier database that you mentioned, especially if you're wanting to do business with government. But recently, we've come across Rapalang with our property accelerator, the South African Supplier Diversity Council, which is also a nonprofit and allows you to submit your information to become supplier ready to some of the organizations that are members of SASTEC as well. So it's important for entrepreneurs to actually understand who these players are that can actually support them from a supplier ready perspective. I mean, in some of the work we do, we work with multinationals, but we work with South African companies. One of the South African companies that we engage with we had to submit 37 different pieces of paper. Everything from shareholder certificates to, MOUs and all of that. So it all depends, like Rapelang earlier said as well, it all depends on the company and what they actually requesting your services for, which will also result in the complexity. We have found though, and you know this, Rapelang, you've come across it too, that sometimes big companies overcomplicate the supplier requirements in many instances, even if it's for a small piece of work. So there's this one size fits all lens when it comes to compliance. And that's something I think worth having an ecosystem conversation about to see if we could start changing some of those rules around compliance, especially when it's for small businesses and especially under certain amounts. So,
No,
what I'd like us to move to now, Rapelang, and the conversation is what do you think are some of the opportunities? And you touched on a few of them, but what are some of the opportunities you have seen that entrepreneurs have actually been able to access as a result of the pandemic, and specifically because their compliance was up to speed?
well, in terms of the funding opportunities, obviously by now most of the COVID related relief funds have been depleted or exhausted because I mean there was just the euphoria of that kind of reliefs, and everyone oversubscribed to those funds, so they ended up getting oversubscribed. So there could be just extremely very few, if they still are, that are still open. So it means that those opportunities were really time-based, and if you didn't act within that time, then those opportunities have lapsed. And also, there has been a lot of people taking advantage of the situation around what COVID also provide in terms of all of these opportunities. So I have seen also most of the guys that are practicing within accounting, they have been an assistance to those entrepreneurs that compliance was not in place. All of a sudden, there's a huge demand for compliance to say that we can assist you to be relief ready. And then they help you put together all the documents. And also those relief funds, they were very different according to the type of mandate for each of those funds. So some of them, they were really looking into what stage of business, and some of them were really looking into industry specific intervention and all of that. And a lot of people within the accounting space and within the legal space, they've been taking advantage of being able to assist entrepreneurs on that. And also some of the opportunities as well that I have observed, some of the entrepreneurs have been taking advantage of. Was Kenyan entrepreneurs have done. So they, in how they've developed a tracing app for COVID-19. So it's able to track and trace the different cases of COVID, where when you download the app, you are able to, it's able to tell you if you are in a COVID environment or COVID-free environment, just for you to know if you are exposed or you are likely to be exposed or not. So, and then that is something that is being endorsed by their Department of Health so that they can do the whole tracing. And actually, the project that we are working on as well, maybe I didn't touch on that as well. We are busy also on a COVID-19 project. So, but we are more involved on the PR and marketing side of it, and then using also digital strategies to communicate the message of the campaign, and which is more educational around issues of COVID-19. So this campaign as well is busy developing a tracing app that is going to enable the people to use the app to trace the COVID case and all of that. So those are just some of the opportunities that people are looking into in ensuring that they take advantage of this COVID.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rapelang. So for those of you that have joined us, if you have any questions for Rapelang or myself, please use the chat function and we'll be happy to answer those. Rapelang, while we have individuals on the line still, can you share your contact details? How can they reach you if they want to know more about your products and services?
Yeah, I think social media will be a great platform for them to see some of the work that we do and some of the work that we have done. So on all my social media platforms, my name as it is, Rapelang Motsumi. So Facebook is like that, Twitter as well. So you can just search Rapelang Motsumi, and Instagram as well. So, but I think WhatsApp always works best for me, and they can also get me on the WhatsApp number, which is 084-435-6668. And then we can chat there and connect about, what is it that they are pursuing. I just got a call, I think, an hour ago. Another entrepreneur is getting into the hygiene space. So they're looking into how they navigate through the compliance of that as well, because it's also, partly compliance heavy.
Okay. So for those of you that have joined us, or if you're watching this on Facebook Live or our recording on our YouTube channel after the live session, please remember that we don't charge for our sessions, but we would love for you to make a donation to Phoenix, which is a funding platform for students, if you found value in the session, and you'll find the details on your screen. I'm going to leave it there while Rapelang and I close off this discussion. And remember, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat line, or direct your question using the Q&A button as well. Okay, so I think there's a question come through on the chat line, Rapelang. It's from Harmony. Harmony, welcome. Harmony is an entrepreneur on one of our IBM programs. When is the right time to do an annual tax returns, monthly or at the end of the financial year? Rapelang, do you want to address that?
Just give me a second, Jayshree. Can you repeat the question again? I think I lost you there.
When is the right time to do annual tax returns, monthly or at the end of the financial year?
So there are different tax returns, whether it's a tax return for the annual return, which is the IT 14. So that one is an annual return, means that you do it annually. And then there's a provisional tax as well. So that is done provisionally, which is going to be done twice a year. So normally around September and Feb. So then you have to comply with that in terms of so provisional tax is not a separate tax type, it's just a payment method, just like your PAYE as well, which you have to do it monthly. I think before the 7th of each and every month, you have to file and be able to pay the prescribed amounts according to what you would have filed. So the PAYE, you will file it each and every month. And then the VAT as well, if you are registered for VAT, is bi-monthly. So you comply in terms of after 2 months. So it just depends on what tax type is that. So that's why we're saying that VAT is bi-monthly, the PAYE is monthly, and the provisional tax is biannually. You file twice in a year, and the ITR 14, you file once in a year because it's an annual return.
Okay, so we have an interesting question here from Kanyane. It says, register my company, register with SARS, then check regulations compliance in my business industry. Did I get the order right?
No, it's fantastically right. You just hit it on the nail.
Okay, great
Yeah, but
stuff.
sometimes it's not a matter of which order you have to take. It just depends where you are, what you need to use it for what. So I wouldn't really say that there's an order that you have to follow, but sometimes about what you need when. Because in terms of the bank account as well, someone may decide that I'm not ready to trade now, I'll open the bank account later. So someone may do it immediately after they get registered. So
Yeah.
it will depend on circumstances.
And that's an important point because most of the organizations, from a supplier readiness perspective, they would ask you for proof of your banking details. So, you know, we
Exactly.
might think that it's going to be an unnecessary cost up front, but in order to be eligible to be a supplier for many of the big organizations, you have to show proof of banking. And it can't be your private bank account. It has to be a business bank account with the name of the business that you have registered as well. So it can't be an unrelated business bank account. And you know, compliance is quite detailed. And if I were to give a piece of advice in the space to anyone that's viewing this recording or the live broadcast, is to investigate all of the compliance requirements fully for your particular industry, as well as the generic requirements, and engage with professionals like Rapelang or other professionals that work in the space. So if on every one of our programs, we bring in Rapelang to engage with all of the beneficiaries, because it's important to have this type of compliance readiness up to speed if you want to be taken seriously by some of the bigger companies out there. And both Rapelang and I have found that unfortunately, more often than not, big business stay away from working with small business because compliance becomes a barrier to entry. And most small businesses do not have all of their compliance documentation readily available and up to standard. And that you are creating a barrier for yourself if you don't focus on the space. So, Rapelang, lastly, what's the one piece of advice you would like to give entrepreneurs that are viewing this as a closing statement?
I think for me, it's really, I always say that don't focus on the current circumstances, focus on where you are going. And I think COVID comes at a time where we can be heavily distracted about what is happening right now and lose sight of where we are going and what we are building. And I think we don't have to lose sight of that, because that is what is going to keep us going. Because remember that for most of us, everything that we do has been affected, has been halted. So I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. Someone was saying that when you talk to corporate now, everyone is telling you that they have moved their budgets to focus on the COVID crisis. We're only going to now focus the budget on procuring anything that has to do with occupational health and safety of our employee, because that's what is of priority right now. So if you have been servicing them, they would say that, hold on for now, we are focusing on on COVID. And that can be very discouraging. But also, how do you use this time to pivot, to realign, to re-strategize, to ensure that you are able to give corporate South Africa what they need at this point in time? If they cannot buy what you are selling to them right now, and you can always pivot in any way possible. I mean, I was talking to another lady within the she was privy to the what is happening within the procurement. So they needed laptops for their employees, because now once people going to go to work at home, so they need infrastructure. So now they had to procure laptops from those entrepreneurs. So but now the company or the entrepreneurs that came to sell to them those laptops, they just told them that this laptop, we are going to put, Java, we are going to put certain pre-installed softwares and apps that are going to do this, that are going to enhance the quality of productivity for your employees. So you see now the innovation there. Someone is taking a normal laptop that you buy from the shop and say that I'm just going to pre-install certain apps and software. It become a new solution altogether. And it's not just seen as a normal laptop. It's a solution because it's built with things that enables the much needed productivity, that talks to the COVID situation that the company is facing. It means that now you are thinking about solving for the organization. And they were, instead of them just selling that, buying and selling that laptop maybe for 10,000 rand, each unit of that laptop, they sold it for 27,000 rand for each unit. And that corporate company was procuring 2,000 units of those laptops. Then we can do the math and see how much that is for 2,000 of their staff members. So what is the innovation there? They just say, we are going to pre-install this and this, it's going to do this, it's going to do that, and then this is how it's going to enhance the product. And that is a thinking that we must, when they would have just said that, oh, we are an IT company, so companies are no longer procuring infrastructure, but for them, they thought about it in a more COVID-aligned opportunity. And I think that is how, and maybe the last thing, Jayesh, without taking much of your time, when we talk about innovation, we are not trying to say that you must think something out of the box. I was telling a story of how when I was just passing at the robot, I came across this beggar, you know, the guys who beg for money at the robots. So he was holding a selfie stick, and at the end of it, there was a cup that was some attached to the selfie stick. So I was wondering, what is this? And then I realized that this guy has realized that his hustle has been disrupted. So now he looked for a selfie stick to put the cup there, so that as he comes to beg money from you, he stretches a selfie stick to your car. Why? So that he can observe social distancing and be compliant with what is happening. And it doesn't take rocket science, because even the guy on the street can do it. I believe that there's no an excuse for an entrepreneur not to innovate and think COVID, solution driven, kind of solutions. So if a beggar on the street can do it, I believe that an entrepreneur can do that as well. So
Definitely,
there are a lot we can
Rapelang.
say, but
Yeah, no, thank you
those are
so
just some of the
much.
things that we can
Yeah,
look
thank
into.
you so much for sharing that. I mean, in our programs, we teach innovation as well. It's so important to get individuals to start thinking outside of the box. And you shared some great examples. I'm sure, so many individuals will benefit from the session and the recording. I see our chat line just lighting up. I just want to see if we've missed any questions. Okay. Kanyana just says, interesting story. And she also asked, does it matter which bank? We don't endorse any particular bank. Just make sure you choose a bank that can offer you the right products and services, can help you open a business account. It's important that you are able to have a business account for your business. That's what companies will need as well. So with that, Rapelang, I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much. I'll see you again tomorrow on our Propreneur program. For those of you that have found value in the session and you want to make a donation, you can make a donation to Phoenix, and that helps students access university fees. So thank you, Rapelang. And with that, I'm going to just say goodbye to all of you as well.
Thank you so much, Jayshree.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye.